Okay, so Queen Elizabeth, she ascends the throne as the sovereign. She owns all the land. Now, if you're paying attention to what's going on all over North America, you've got to get your head on straight. Quebec City is going to celebrate 500 years in 7 years, I think. 1532 was the founding of Quebec City. Now, many people in the United States may be saying, I don't care, whatever, blah, 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 the French, the froggies, da, 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 da. You can't do that because it's critical for your understanding of everything that's happened since. Because let's face it, why should Canadians and Americans be like this? Because it benefits the British Empire. North America is the home of the Canadians and the Americans, and they've got to start working together. Particularly the Canadians need to get their heads on straight. So, Quebec City is founded in 1532, but it would be another 31 years before Queen Elizabeth I, as a sovereign, would issue letters patent to Sir Humphrey Gilbert to create the first English colony of, come on all you Americans, I know you know this one, Newfoundland. That's right. Now, Sir Humphrey Gilbert, his ship crashed in the Azores, and his letters patent and others things went to Sir Walter Raleigh, who went on to found Massachusetts and the Pilgrim colony there, which I believe he got out of the English Parliament. And it was a very important, well, it wasn't letters patent, it was a charter out of the Parliament, because it stipulated that all the colonists had the rights of freeborn Englishmen, which is where they learned to study the common law. Anyways, that's how Newfoundland came into existence, and England got into the colony game with Queen Elizabeth. But subsequent to Queen Elizabeth issuing this letters patent and creating Newfoundland, she was demoted by her Privy Council of learned advisors because they ruled that the English people also owned the land. So Queen Elizabeth went from being a sovereign to being a monarch. And the sovereignty claim of the English people plus the monarch was then headed over into a Department of Lands known as the Crown in Chancery. So if you're in Canada today and you see these lands that are called Crown lands, it doesn't mean the crown on the head of a king or a queen. It means the Crown in Chancery lands, which is really a fancy way of saying Department of Lands of England. So this Department of Lands, the Crown in Chancery, would manage the sovereignty claims of the English people plus the monarch from that time forward. Okay? Now, there's a guy you should probably know about. His name is James. And no, I'm not talking about James Bond. I'm talking about King James. Now, he was King James I in England, and he was a monarch. That's the dude that the King James Version Bible is named for, that guy. Okay? The one that I know you have a copy of and you read all the time. At least if you're a Canadian. If you live in the United States, there was an earlier Bible whose name currently escapes me that was commonly used in the United States. But anyways, these translations were made roughly around the same time. King James was a sovereign in Scotland, and he was King James VI. So 2 thrones, 1 guy. King James I of England, monarch. King James VI of Scotland, sovereign. He owned all the land. He created a colony for Scotland called Nova Scotia, and that was a bid to get Scotland into the colony game. France took all that over, and Scotland's colony bid didn't really go so well. But if you're wondering why the Florida Panthers have the cross of St. Andrew on their jersey, that's why, is because Florida was potentially going to become another Scottish colony, but it didn't. That's also why Lynyrd Skynyrd carry that flag around behind them when they go and play Sweet Home Alabama. They're flying the Scottish flag or the cross of St. Andrew because they're from Florida. Anyways, France took over Nova Scotia and Newfoundland and everything that today is southern Quebec and southern Ontario, right out to the edge of the Great Lakes and all the way down to the Gulf of America. Go Trump! Which the United States has had the right to rename since the 1878 or 1873. There was some battle in there. So the only thing that England controlled from the early 1600s all the way up until the Revolutionary, well, up until the 1763, were the 13 New England colonies. Now, if you live in Canada, I know you know exactly what those 13 New England colonies are, because I know you've read the Declaration of Independence. Probably not. Definitely worth a read if you're a Canadian. Get on it. Very important. Those 13 New England colonies weren't run by the Crown and Chancery, but by a group called the Lords of Trade and Plantation that had been given the permission by the Crown and Chancery to run those 13 colonies. And it was under those Lords of Trade and Plantations that all the abuses of those colonists were racked up. Okay? So England and France go to the Revolutionary War, and in 1763, France cedes all the land of North America to England because they preferred to keep their Guadeloupe sugar thing going on. And they recognized that North America was going to become too hot to handle, so they gave it all to England. And England looked after it by the Crown and Chancery for 13 more years until the Revolution began. And the 13 colonists said, "We've had enough of this shit. We are out of here." So the people loyal to the Crown from Maine and New Hampshire went up to what is today Nova Scotia and was then Nova Scotia. And the people from Massachusetts and New York went up to what is today Ontario. And back then was just sort of a patch of land that was sitting around underneath British tutelage or underneath the Crown Chancery in this sort of stasis. So the Revolutionary War happened, and great success. A lot of blood spilled to achieve that victory. And of course, France came to the assistance of the colonists, as did some people from Quebec, or what is known as Quebec today. And for that, they were offered to become citizens or sovereigns of the sovereign states. So let's just review that to finish off this episode or installment of this series. England went from having a sovereign to a monarch. The people of England also owned the land that was controlled by the Crown and Chancery. The Crown and Chancery gave the Lords of the Trade and Plantation the right to manage the New England colonies. They fought the Revolutionary War. They won the Revolutionary War, and then they became sovereign states because the people owned the land. Okay, and that is the legitimate seat of government, is the ownership of the land. So it was then in the hands of the sovereigns. So 100% of the people of Maine were the sovereign of Maine, and 100% of the people of Virginia were the sovereign of Virginia, etc. And they were sovereign states. And that meant that each one of those states was equivalent with Portugal or Spain or France or Great Britain or Prussia or Russia or any other, because they were sovereign states. So let's just leave that there, and we'll come back for part 3 soon.